buddy, and we got along.
Hey Costa, how's it going?
Hey, Brandon, I'm going to be on mute for 2 seconds. I just got to finish up a tail end of a phone call, then I'll be good to go.
You're good. I'm going to reach out to my individuals to make sure they're still joining today too, so I don't want to waste your time.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Costa. Good morning. Brandon, good morning. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on, and I'm probably going to leave the call, Brandon, because I think all of the candidates are your candidates today.
Perfect. Sounds good, Michael. I appreciate it. And good morning to Chuck. Good morning to Kevin. Good morning to Mark. So it looks, and Mike too. Hey, Mike, how you doing? So
Good.
Thanks for everybody joining. Costa said he's finishing up with something and he will be joining us momentarily, but really appreciate you all joining this founders call today.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Happy to be here.
How's everybody's week going so far?
Survived the hurricane, so we're good down in Florida.
You know, I was thinking about you. I'm kind of glued to the Weather Channel these days. How about your son in Tallahassee? I saw they got hard.
No, it bended east, and so it missed him. He didn't lose power or anything like that. So it's a bunch of college kids that got an additional 3 days off. So most of the mayhem that's going to happen in Tallahassee is not going to be from the storm.
I gotcha. Well, that's good. I'm glad that it wasn't more severe, because I know how those hurricanes can just tear apart communities and everything. So I think everybody's going to take a lot away from today's call. You get to speak to Costa one-on-one. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story. So I'm really excited to have you guys all on this call today.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. I'm good to go now. Did I hear Michael's voice for a second?
Michael was on briefly, but then he had to jump for something. So
got it. Cool. Well, we can go ahead and kick it off. There's no one else in the waiting room, and we can jump right into it. So thanks for being on this call, guys. I usually do a brief background of how we got to where we are, and then a little bit about where we're going and what we're trying to achieve with this business. And so the most effective part of the call is always Q&A, because over the past couple of years, we've been able to talk to people from every corner of the country, from Alaska to Maine to Miami, and so we're really able to get that diversity of ideas and opinions and experiences, and that has helped us as a franchise system kind of figure out what are some of these best paths, what are some of the things that people are concerned about. And so these have been really productive phone calls. We do have a discovery day every month. It's typically on the third Thursday of the month. That will be the case on October on a go forward basis. I believe in September we're holding a one a little bit earlier, and then a discovery day virtually as well. But that's where we kind of go into the secret sauce of the business in terms of some proprietary stuff. And so if you have any real pointed questions, more than happy to answer them, but that's really what our discovery day is for. So anyway, I'll just roll right into it. My background is in finance. I had graduated with an MBA and a Master's of Science in Finance. I started off in retail banking at TD Bank in Baltimore, and then moved to brokerage at TD Ameritrade. And then from there, I went to the Merrill Lynch Financial Advisor Program. And from there, I went to T. Rowe Price to work in asset management in Baltimore. And I had a really good job. I enjoyed my job. I had several securities licenses by the time I had gotten to T. Rowe Price, and I was pretty invested in my career, but there was always this side to me that was kind of like itching at me, that I wanted to have an impact. And when you work for companies that are as large as the ones that I just mentioned, it's really difficult as an individual to make a lasting impact on the company, at least quickly. And so I started looking at businesses. I'd always been entrepreneurial as a kid. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and I thought to myself, maybe if I open a side business, that will scratch that itch and I can kind of just keep moving forward with my really nice career in finance. And so I started looking at businesses that I felt were manager centric, but not skilled manager centric. And what I mean by that is I wanted to get into a business where a key employee couldn't hold me hostage. I wanted to get into a business where there wasn't these intrinsic risks that could pop up at any time. And so for me at the time, I was looking at businesses where what does the continuity of the business look like when the manager has their day off? So what does that day look like, and how does the business operate? And so the example I give, and I've given on this call many times, especially coming from a family that has owned restaurants and diners, I like to talk about the pizzeria, where if the one person who knows how to toss the dough and make the pizza calls out, what do you do in that situation? You're kind of stuck. And so I wanted to do a business where if the manager wanted to had to leave, something happened to them, the business would be fine. And so I came upon a Quick Lube in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that the owners were just ready to get out. It was a small independent shop that had dwindling sales. It had trailing losing revenue. And so it was an opportunity to kind of step in and ask for some seller financing. I was able to take over the business for very little money. I kept my job at T. Rowe Price. I spent a lot of time at the time on Yelp, kind of reverse engineering what people were most concerned about in our industry. I felt that there was a huge service gap in the space. And so I thought there was an opportunity there to maybe put my own imprint on the business and how I thought things should be based upon the feedback I was reading from those reviews. And very quickly, I was able to take over that store and turn it around very quickly based on changing it to the model that is now our overarching model, which is the oil change only model. And it went really well. I did leave my job at T. Rowe Price and I jumped into the oil change business full time. It was a lot of fun and I was enjoying building the business. And so we opened a second store in 2016 in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, which is a town of 6,000 people. And that really validated the model for me. And then our third location was in Chicago. And then that really further, I like to say very early on in the company's DNA was that semi-absentee ownership model, because I physically, being in Baltimore, I could not be in Chicago on a regular basis. And so it was very important to establish standard operating procedures, utilize third-party vendors, utilize third-party apps. Obviously now we all have our smartphones and we're in a very app-centric world, but if you can kind of put yourself back in 2014, 15, 16, apps weren't as big. And so I really leaned into that culture of being able to run the business from my cell phone. Fast forward to 2020, we were up to about 10 locations when I reached out to the folks at Frandevco. I interviewed a few different franchise development companies about franchising the brand because I felt we were in a good place to rubber stamp the model and really take it to scale, since I did believe that the oil change only model was what the consumer wanted. Our franchisees agreed. Almost every single franchisee who has come through our doors has had some kind of oil change story themselves, where they either were sold something they didn't need, or they waited in line for an hour, or the experience just went somewhere wrong, where when we talk about our model and how we are oil change only as our North Star, and no high pressure upselling, it really resonated. So we've been able to sell 163 territories to 58 individual franchisees. We are over 40 locations at the moment. We will be at about 50 by the end of the year, with another 100 to 200 over the next 4 to 5 years. And so what we're trying to capitalize on is the model that we're selling. We're trying to be basically the only one in our space that is doing what we're doing, because there are really no more true quick lube models. And the quick lube model in the past had always been quick lube and then quick lube plus. And I think that has evolved into quick lube plus and quick lube plus plus. And there really is no quick lube model anymore, besides us and a handful of independent operators. So that's where we were, where we are, and where we're going. Would love to jump into Q&A, and Brandon, if you want to kind of curate Q&A, we can go round and round, and I've got basically until 11:30.
Awesome. Thanks, Costa. I appreciate it. And Mike, just because I see you first on the screen, why don't I kind of start with you?
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet you, Costa. Thanks for taking the time with us today. One of the questions that I had after my last meeting with Brandon was, first time I saw it, and that's why it just kind of stuck with me, is that you guys sold to a private equity firm this year. So congratulations for that. I'm sure that there's an infusion of capital as well as a little capitalization for yourself as part of that process. Usually private equity firms don't really own a business for more than 3 to 5 years, say. Usually they have some type of idea of what they're planning on doing with it, whether that's selling it off to another person that wants to own the firm, or taking it public. Can you share any information on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Mike. I appreciate it. What market are you in?
So I'm currently with Raymond James.
But what location are you in?
I'm in Tampa.
Tampa, okay. Oh, how's things going? Everything good with you?
Yeah, the storm missed us, and I have a son up at Tallahassee at FSU, and it bent east for him, so we didn't lose power or anything else. So just a lot of loose debris on the ground, but we're in good shape. Thanks for asking.
So the individual who purchased a stake in our company, just to be clear, he only purchased a equity stake in the franchise entity, not my corporate locations. And so I still control 20 locations that I have 100% control over. There was an injection of capital into the franchise system, and that was and I was very strategic about who I wanted to get in bed with, for the very reasons that you said. I wanted to make sure that the long-term goals were realized. And so it was important to not jump in with someone who had short-term goals to just churn and burn, get as many stores open as quickly as possible to show a lower snow count, which is just sold but not open in the franchise world. And so I'm still the CEO of the franchise business. I still have equity in the franchise business. So from a day-to-day perspective, nothing has really changed, other than our support staff is more robust, our construction team is more robust, and we've basically gotten rid of some of the hair around the edges of the processes and training and things of that nature. Because the gentleman, his name's Michael Abdi, he is a very experienced franchise operator. He has his finger in a few different franchise systems that he's basically matured up, and so there is a long-term vision in place. One of the things that we do at Discovery Day, one of the very first thought exercises I like to do with the people that are there, is I ask, when I say fast food, what do you think of? And for the longest time, it was probably 8 or 9 out of 10 say McDonald's, and then 2 people will say something else. For the past at least 6 months, it's 50-50 Chick-fil-A, McDonald's. And then even more recently, we're starting to see a lot more Raising Cane's. And the reason I do that thought experiment is there is no brand that is too big that you cannot change the top of mind brand awareness. So our vision remains that if we execute on what we're doing, especially as electric vehicles penetrate the market in a more meaningful way, we feel as though that we can take that spot, especially when our competitors seem perfectly content with falling into this realm of no brand identity, just becoming another Midas, Meineke, Monroe. We do tires, we do brakes, we do everything. You know, the thing that got them where they were was being really good at fast oil changes. And in my opinion, for the time being, that's still what the consumer wants. If the consumer ever changed their mind and they're like, hey, I want the people who do my oil changes to do my, you know, other things, then okay, we'll have that conversation. But the feedback that I get from my customers on a day-to-day basis is they don't want people who's changing their oil, changing their brakes. They don't want people that's changing their oil, changing their tires. And so that remains our North Star. We have no plans as of right now. We get inquired all the time because we kind of have lightning in the bottle right now. And so there's always people approaching us. But, you know, I have personally, even before franchising, I had been approached by Take 5 when I was like 27, 28 years old, and they threw a large number at me, essentially almost to just go away, I felt like at the time. And, you know, I feel as though that when you're being disruptive and you're coming into a space that there is a gap between what the consumer wants and what's being offered, that's where you can make opportunity.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Going to the next round. Chuck, I got you here. Chuck Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Costa, thank you for your time. Just maybe a follow-up on the response you just provided regarding competition. I'm in the Dallas DFW Metroplex, and probably, I don't know, within a mile radius.
You got 3 Take 5s?
I got 3 Take 5s. There's right there. There's just a number of competitors in the general area. What's your position relative to standing something up next to one of those other locations?
Yeah, so traditionally, and that's a great question, Chuck. Traditionally, I'm never been afraid to be down the road from a Jiffy Lube, because that means that the consumer base is educated on the service to an extent. And so when you go into a space that doesn't have a quick lube service and everyone in the community is so used to having an appointment and having to leave their car and all that, then there's this educational process as you go through the business cycle to like, hey, there's this other business model where you just show up, get an oil change and leave. So I've never been afraid to be near like a Jiffy Lube. I think that Take 5 is kind of going off the rails a little bit, especially ironically in the Florida market and the Houston and Dallas market. It seems to me that since Driven Brands has gone public, they've really positioned themselves to really only care about top line revenue. And so I don't know how sustainable their model is. If you look at some of their rents, it's just incredibly high rent. And they're just taking on a whole lot of debt. And I don't know how much the consumer actually likes the product that they're giving. I will leave that to you guys to do your own kind of independent research on the Take 5s and what people in the area feel about them. But I used to say to that question, Chuck, I have no problem going in to that market. But I think as we've matured and we've gotten more in depth with our data finding, like if a market, it doesn't matter how bad their service is, and everyone could actually hate them, but if there are 3 within a 3-mile radius, now we're getting into this territory where it's like, okay, we're better off going into, say, Tyler, Texas, where there's not 3 Take 5s versus right in between this cannibalistic market where Take 5 has 3 brand new buildings that are bright red and everybody sees them. And it's like, it's just not an uphill battle that you want to fight. And so, you know, we would look at it very closely. We have been kind of looking at tertiary markets with we have a couple of Dallas franchisees, Fort Worth, McKinney area. And then on the south side, we're more like Bedford and in that area, but we'll take a look at it. 85% of Quick Lube customers come from within a 3-mile radius. So that's a very important industry stat that has been the case for a very long time. And so when your market is controlled that tight.
Hey, Costa, you just froze up there for a second.
Yeah, I lost his audio too.
Oh man. he was making a really good point too. Let's see if I can just chat him real quick. Let's see here. There he goes. I'm sure he's signing back in right now. Here he goes. Costa, you're muted right now.
Hey, the hurricane made it to the mid-Atlantic pretty fast. I don't know what happened. I just dropped off there. So, Chuck, hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully I got the last part out quickly.
Yeah, thank you.
And we can go back to Mike. So I talked to, looks like Kevin has in the chat that he's still very new into this process. So we're going to be meeting later today for a call. So I'll go back to you, Mike.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the, electric car and electric vehicles. And I know that obviously it's a small percentage now, and I don't think it's going to take off as fast as they say it is. But, when you have, like Chuck brought up, there's 3 Take 5s, and maybe you build it a little bit further away, but you're a fifth in the same demographics that has a growing number of EV users. I don't want to call it a substantial threat, but you might be fighting over the same diminishing customer base.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. You will be. And, there's 350 million internal combustion engine vehicles registered in the United States. So there are certainly business models built on consumer bases that are even half or a third of that number. So there's still plenty of cars. The average car on the road is the oldest it's ever been. The average car loan, and I don't know how good this is for our society. It's almost as scary as the credit card numbers, but I remember I bought my first F-150 after I got my job at TD Ameritrade, and the longest you could amortize it out was 5 years. And then recently my wife's looking for a car, and they're like, oh yeah, you can finance up to 10 years on a car now. And I'm like, that's insane. But also for our business, that just means the minute that car drives off the lot, it's depreciating. So it's underwater immediately. And that means that if the customer is stuck with a car for 10 years because they financed it, then they have to get oil changes to keep it going. Otherwise they're stuck. So, my goal, especially looking at kind of the escalating rent situation and the overheating of the commercial real estate market, we're at a point right now, if you go onto like LoopNet or Crexy and you look at some of these quick lubes for sale, and it's easy to throw rocks at Take 5, and everyone on this call has referenced them, so I'll speak to them again. But they're trying to sell 10-year leases and 15-year leases at a 5 cap, but you can go and get US Treasuries now, which are essentially risk-free, returns for the same amount. So who in their right mind is going to pay $3 million for a Take 5 building when you have that same risk that you just mentioned, Mike? So my goal is, with our lower rents, with our lower overhead, with our less moving parts, I want to have a bigger piece of the smaller pie, because I think there will be a point in time where it just won't be sustainable to be an oil change business and your rent be $12,000 a month. There's just not going to be enough cars, and the intervals are not going to make sense. And so either, I don't know what's going to happen, and I can't pretend that I do, but I know that if we are synonymous with oil change only, and we have a smaller footprint, and we are able to make money with half as many cars coming through the doors, and then we survive kind of that what I think will happen, which is a lot of these places are going to end up having to shut their doors because they're not doing enough oil changes, then we're just going to have a larger piece of a smaller pie.
Right. A new equilibrium will be created.
Yeah.
By the shift in the market.
And there's no, like, so there's also all these other external factors that need to be considered first. And, you know, our grid right now, if I think the amount of EVs on the road is 7%, something like that. And I think the data is even if 14% of cars being sold are EVs, and I think 7% of cars on the road are EVs. And even I believe if that number went to like 15, that the grid would just have a Houston level crisis. I use the Houston example from a couple years ago when the whole grid shut down. You know, California is already telling people don't use your AC. So there's a huge grid problem that needs to be resolved first before we can even consider more than 20% of cars on the road being EV. So you have that infrastructure problem first. Then the second one is the mining of the materials that's required for EVs. So I think that it will be a slow adoption, and we have plenty of runway before that happens. The average car on the road exceeded 12 years, I believe. And so that's, you know, that's a long time to cycle those cars even out. So even if internal combustion engine vehicles were banned today, someone signed a law and said you can no longer drive them, you got basically a 10-year runway in perpetuity until that actually happens.
It's a great point. Hey, I got about 3 more minutes left. So Chuck, would you like to ask another question for Costa?
No, I think I'm good. It's been very insightful.
Great, Mike. Going back to you.
Then, can you talk a little bit about this product? You know, I think that that's a major consideration of mine, that, you know, that I'm working well with the franchisor, that there's amount of support, networking with ththings change in the marketplace, things come up.
Mike, I missed the very first part of that question.
Demographics.
I missed you were
Sure.
cutting in and out there. What was the very first part of that?
Yeah, Mike, we're not getting audio. Did you want to include your question in the chat? We got you.
Give it another go. Give it another go.
Mike, it sounds like your audio is coming through now.
I'll be there in a second. No.
I got you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
How does the southern market look for franchisees?
That was Kevin's question. Mike, what was I'll go, I can speak to Kevin's real quick. So Kevin,
Sure.
like the Southeast Florida real estate is very difficult at the moment because everyone thinks that their land is worth, I think, a little bit more than what it's worth, and we need to stick to our model. It's very important that we stay within the bands of our model so that we can be an oil change only business. We have a store in Gulfport, Mississippi that is doing really well. We're building a store in Chalmette, Louisiana, which is like next to the Slidell area. And so we think that store is going to do really well. The kind of traditional southern states, we have a Huntsville, Alabama franchisee. He hasn't found a site yet, pretty new to the process, but and then you have, of course, kind of the core cities that people think of, like Charlotte and Atlanta. We've sold a lot of territories. It's been a little bit difficult finding real estate because those are incredibly hot markets that COVID kind of built up. There was a bunch of people, commuter people that are non-commuter people that decided they were going to move to places like Charlotte and Atlanta, and that drove up the price of essentially everything. But we don't have, outside of Gulfport, Mississippi, and the new store in that will be built in Louisiana, we don't have a huge southern footprint at the moment, but we feel as though that temperament, that clientele will really appreciate the model just the way that Gulfport has. So those people, you know, they want to get an oil change, they want to get in and out on with their day, they don't want to be beat over the head for other things, and so it seems to be pretty good right now, and Gulfport's growing at a pretty good rate. Mike, what was
I see that it's 11:30, and I know that you had kind of a hard stop, so.
I've got a little bit of time. I can.
Okay. I was just, my question was around the franchisee franchisor, you know, relationship, and how you guys are working to build that out, create a community for your owners, so that, you know, if there are changes in the, you know, industry or demographics or whatever the case may be, that there's that support that's going to the independent owners.
So we're very heavy on Slack, and you know, in the early days, I had never franchised before, so I leaned very heavily on Fran Devco to give guidance on best practices. And we had a lot of former driven guys that were with Mayco and Meineke and Amco in those early days before those companies became national brands. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to go forward with Fran Devco. And you know, one of the things they're like, well, you know, you probably shouldn't do Slack. You don't want franchisees to be able to commiserate with each other. And then I viewed it from the complete opposite. I was like, well, you know, if we get all the franchisees together in a room, then they can be collaborative. We can interact with them. And thus far, the Slack interactions have been a net positive for us, for sure. We have a channel for all of the operators that are open and operating. You don't get invited into that channel until your store opens, and so on a day-to-day basis, these guys are talking to each other about what works for them, what hasn't worked, what's a trend that they're seeing. Oh, there's a service bulletin on the Kias, they're getting stolen. Well, we can post something in our store and add that value, give that value to the customer, say, hey, we see you drive a 2020 Hyundai, maybe have you had that anti-safety lock thing fixed yet? You know, those are the kind of things that are going on inside our Slack channel, and I'm active on it in a day-to-day basis. Anyone can DM me and ask me a question if they need to connect with me. It will be more difficult as stores open and we eclipse 100 franchisees in the next couple of years, but even then, like, that's always been a philosophy of mine. I remember when I opened my 8th location and we were running Facebook ads, and we were basically getting 100,000 impressions a week, and that translates to about 10,000 engagements, whether it's a like, a comment, a message. And you know, for me, it was important to just touch those people, and that was part of the reason that our stores built so fast. Was people enjoyed the one-on-one interaction, and the conversion of someone who messaged us on Facebook or Instagram was just so much higher than, say, a direct mail or postcard, or someone who sees a Google ad or something like that. And so, and it also translated into my staffing as well, right? So what a lot of businesses are learning right now is it's much more expensive to train someone new than to just retain your current employees. And because the marketplace is so sparse right now for people who want to come in and do some of these entry-level jobs, it's important to keep your employees and not have high turnover, because there's not a lot of inventory of labor out there. And so for me, engaging with my employees on a one-on-one basis, even to this day, when I have 63 employees for my corporate stores, you know, it's important to connect with them on a regular basis so that, you know, they feel as though they're not just another number. And there's no excuse in 2023. I've been saying this since 2017. I've actually been saying it since I saw the movie The Founder, which is the McDonald's story. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but you know, the way that I viewed it, you know, Ray Kroc opening 1,000 McDonald's in 1950, whatever, without the tools that I have, I would internally say to myself, what excuses do I have to not be able to connect with these people with all the tools available? There's no excuse. And so, you know, as we grow, we'll continue to build up the team and and make sure that there's many points of contact with the franchisees, but I hope to in perpetuity also make myself as available as possible.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I like that thought process because I've worked in situations where I've had multiple business people and I felt like multiple firms that we're doing business with, they share a lot of the same issues, problems, industry changes, things of that nature. And they're not necessarily, they're in the same business line, but they're not necessarily competing against one another, and being collaborative to solve issues, I think, is important.
Yeah. Awesome. I gotta hop, guys. I appreciate your time. And if you do come to Discovery Day, look forward to meeting you. If you come on virtually, we'll talk to you then.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thanks again, Costa. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Brandon.